people 17 years ago, when everybody was looking at China, decided to turn the other direction and focus on India, which has turned out to be a pretty good decision for us. Nothing against China, but I think as a television market, India has become much more certainly friendly for outsiders, and has grown in a exponential sort of way. It is certainly our biggest operation among our international operations. It's been tremendously successful for us, and I think we're, to use a baseball analogy, sorry, we're in the second inning out of 9, and if I were really smart or on my game, I would have given you a cricket analogy, but I'm not, so I apologize for that. I know just enough about cricket to be dangerous. But I think it's really early days. I think you're seeing, just the macro numbers, just, the population, which drives the advertising, which drives the distribution, and all of those sorts of things are so much larger and farther ahead than many other places in the world, makes this market so significant in the world. But we're just on the beginning of digitization, which is the natural evolution for a market like this, and we've seen it happen in most markets around the world. And so in a sense, we're a little bit behind in India, but not relative to I think the age or the chronology of where the market should be. The fascinating thing about playing in the US market and the international markets is that the US market does seem to set a fairly predictable timeline for events and changes and things that you can see are going to happen. And so I think it gives us ability to look out and see what is likely to happen in this market. I think this market is on the very early stages, for example, of DVR usage, which of course has become a really important part and interruption vehicle in the U.S. marketplace, because it's just changed the way we look at ratings and how advertisers look at viewership and so forth. And I think it's predictable to say at some point, but I don't know if it's 3 or 5 or 7 or 9 years, that similar kind of thing is going to happen in this market. But in the meantime, distribution continues to grow. The advertising marketplace is very sophisticated in a lot of ways in terms of how advertising is sold and bought in this market. As one of the earlier panels talked a little bit about, certainly the rating and measurement system is controversial. It is controversial everywhere in the world, and so that is not a surprise. But as one of the earlier panelists said, it's a reality we all deal with, and so we just have to find the way to use it as a tool and find the best way to use it to sell our advertising. I think the nonlinear world is at the very, very early stages of evolution as digitization gets out there, as more connected devices get out there. On-demand usage and subscription on-demand usage will become more and more significant as a revenue stream for both the platforms and the content providers. And so I think it's always been a really exciting and dynamic marketplace. It is more so than ever. It's never dull. It's always surprising. It's always exciting. I've lost a lot of sleep dealing with our India business, but I've also had a lot of prideful moments and couldn't be more excited about our situation here and the potential of our business going forward.
Great. Audience question and answer session. Any questions from the audience? Do any of you have questions? I see one hand up there in the back. Do we have mics for the audience? Yes, we do.
Hi, and this is Raman Kalra. I look after media for IPM Consulting. We talked about, and you said that we are a very dynamic market, full of surprises. And the fact that we are also a very young market, we have high population of youth. In your opinion, how do you see that in terms of media distribution, the strategies of reaching out to a consumer as a demographic, vis-a-vis reaching out to the consumer as an individual, will play out a role, number one? And going by your experience of other countries and the other geographies in the world, the cannibalization which we saw in print industry on the revenue with our digital, do you see somewhere down the line that cannibalization happening in the broadcasting? And if yes, to what extent in the Indian context?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last.
The last bit was on cannibalization in broadcast. He said in print we've seen a lot of cannibalization with online offerings eating into existing print, and you did dwell on it. So he wants to know whether that could be a threat going forward, cannibalization because of the digital offerings of broadcasting.
Well, the first part of your question was about the youth, and I think it's a challenge everywhere to reach the audience, and as the fragmentation, so many channels, so many different ways to get the message out there, but finding the most efficient way to spend your marketing dollars to get the audience you want is just, it's the challenge of the ages for anybody who's in marketing. I think in terms of the youth, and we see this all over the world, the social media aspects are going to be more and more important about how the younger generation is reached, whether it's the Facebooks or the social media kind of applications as marketing tools, I think become more and more vital. The good news about that is you can do it in a less expensive way. It's just hard to know what the most effective way is, but as opposed to buying traditional media, like the movie companies are seeing and trying to figure out what's the best way to get the audience and what's the best way to get people into the theaters in that first weekend. And it used to be about buying a 30-second spot on Thursday night on one of the main networks, and that way of trying to get an audience is just not the way everybody's approaching it, and everybody's kind of going trying to tap into these other online, mobile, tablet, second screen sorts of ways. And so I really think that the social media players are going to continue to have an increasingly large importance to the marketing efforts, not just for our business, but I think for anybody who's trying to reach an audience. In terms of the cannibalization question, I think that the challenge for everybody is finding a way to coexist and tap into all of the various outlets and maximize their usage, because more and more different cannibalistic, I guess, kind of outlets are going to, constantly crop up, and there's just no way around it. I think the ability to be nimble and flexible and utilize all of the outlets to try to maximize your message is going to be where the difference is going to be between people who are successful or people who are trying to be in denial about the fact that these things exist.
Yeah, thank you. Just a last point on the first part, the first question of addressing the youth. Do you see that addressing the youth as an individual consumer, as me as an individual, you as an individual, taking over a higher priority than addressing as a demographic segment of the consumers? Do you see that trend picking up in other parts of the world?
I think that advertisers always feel like they want to try to reach a more youthful demographic, because I think they feel like that's the future of the brand loyalty that they're trying to grow. But it doesn't necessarily correspond with the consumption patterns or who has the disposable income to spend. And what we try to do is have offerings to advertisers, in some way or another, from the cradle to the grave, so that we have something we can offer to advertisers that give them something for everybody. The idea that you want to ignore the older demographic, and I won't even begin to define what older is, because I'd probably put myself in a category I don't want to be in. But that's where a lot of the money is, and that's where a lot of the disposable income is, and that's what the advertisers need to tap into. You kind of got to figure out how to get everybody, and not every brand wants to get everybody. Some brands are obviously very specifically targeted to one particular demographic. But there certainly is that kind of prejudice about the younger audience that I don't necessarily think translates into the economics of the business.
Hi,
Vasanthi.
thank you, Sukumar, and thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Very interesting and fascinating. Thank you for talking about the balance between local and global. And I was trying to bring you back to India, where there is many countries within one, and there is so much of diversity in terms of culture, in terms of language. So I just wanted to know what, and obviously Sony has been a trendsetter here too. So I wanted to know what kind of a what you have in plan or what your strategy is to look at that regional versus global versus, and second, very important that I wanted to, taking from the earlier question, most entertainers or most broadcasters who have been on this platform before are saying that they're only here in this business for the sake of entertainment or for money. So I really wanted to know, as somebody who's in so many countries, how do you define yourself as your role in, especially in a country like India, where you are part of the national challenge in many issues that you need to be addressed? And so how do you define yourself? What is your role as a broadcaster internationally and internationally in a country like ours?
Well, the first part of your question, certainly, India is a very large country, many countries within the country, and the regional space is a growing and vital, important part of the future of broadcasting. And certainly we're well established in the national Hindi language space and looking at many opportunities in the regional space, because we absolutely recognize that that's as large a part of today and the future opportunity to get the audience and the eyeballs, and a necessary part of our business. And we're working on the best way to take where we are and what we have and leverage the opportunity into those spaces. So more to come on that. In terms of, I guess, where we see ourselves in the world, or how we define ourselves, our job is to provide entertainment programming to as big an audience around the world as we possibly can. I mean, it's sort of that simple. We're not in the news business anywhere. We don't have a political agenda. We're about content and entertainment and getting to as wide an audience as we can. And that's what we've been doing, and that's hopefully what we'll continue to do for many years.
I think what Vasanthi also wanted to know was whether, from the second part of our question, was whether you had, as an organization, a larger social purpose, right? That was the import of your statement.
Well, I think we want to be responsible citizens of the world, but we don't have a political agenda. So it really is about entertainment, and hopefully doing that in a way that puts forth a positive message about people in the world. But it's ultimately about entertainment.
Which is as it should be, right?
Yeah. We think so.
Hi, Andy. It was a pleasure, by the way. So I've actually considerably spent a lot of my years on the East Coast, specifically Boston. So I would say go Sox. You'll certainly relate to that.
Go Dodgers, but
all right, yeah, I get it. Yeah. So just more of a generic question. So kind of like given, the cultural differences and all that, I mean, considering, the content, you did talk about CSI and West Wing and kind of like more localizing the content. I think the big difference that I see specifically is more the sense of humor. You talk about, kind of like, the quick ones, like the kind of like you throw sarcasm or something, in the conversation. Certainly that plays out in some of the shows. So something like a Curb Your Enthusiasm. I kind of like showed that show to my dad the other day, and he's like, I don't think if I get it. But that's kind of like, if you look at Larry David, kind of like one of the top guys, looking at Seinfeld as well. So looking at comedy specifically, how do you sort of like look at bringing, like identifying shows which would be more specific to India?
Well, as a generalization, American comedies, for the most part, don't really travel all that well internationally. I mean, they sell and they do a decent enough rating in second-tier, outlets or not in prime time and so forth. But in non-English speaking countries, it's unless it's physical humor, the language humor is it's just challenging. And there's always exceptions, and there have been some comedies that have worked really well. But I would guess more than not they're probably more physically oriented than not. In India, we have a comedy channel, Saab, and it's been very, very successful for us. And a lot of that humor happens to be sort of physical humor and that sort of thing, which seems to translate and work well in this market. I wouldn't begin to presume to be able to speak specifically about it in a way that the guys who run our business and run our channels have, but they certainly seem to have found and been able to tap into some sensibility that resonates with the audience because the channel has been very successful, and they've created a number of very successful formats and shows that I guess the dream would be, which hasn't happened yet, but I do absolutely see it happening, is taking one of those formats that was created for this market and recreating it elsewhere in the world as a repurposed local format, as has been done the opposite way around. And that's certainly a goal of ours, but it's like threading the needle and you have to find the right one. But we certainly have a very vibrant development effort there with the content that's being created. And so I expect it'll happen sooner rather than later.
Andy, thank you very much.
That's it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was an excellent discussion. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Sukumar. Please, a round of applause for the panelists, please. Thank you. And now, please remain seated. For 3:15, we have a very important session, Making and Planning a 1,000 Crore Blockbuster. And that will happen at 3:15 at the same ballroom. Thank you.
Good afternoon again. Planning and making a 1,000 crore blockbuster. For those of you who haven't observed this in our program, there is a keynote being made by Mr. Greg Foster, Chairman and President, IMAX Entertainment. It's all right if you haven't observed it because it's not visible there right now. It's not printed. But just thought I'll share that with you. So the session starts with a very interesting keynote by Mr. Greg Foster. And I've just found out from my reliable sources that they're on our way and they'll be joining us on the panel in a few minutes. So please hold on to your patience. Let me call upon our celebrated moderator for the session, Mr. Karan Johar, co-chair, FICCI Media and Entertainment Committee. Karan. I'll also call upon the panel, Mr. Greg Foster, Chairman and President, IMAX Entertainment. Can you please join us on the panel, sir? Mr. Vijay Singh, CEO, Foxstar Studio India. Siddharth Roy Kapoor, MD Studios, Disney UTV. Mr. Ajay Bijli, MD PVR. Mr. Vikram Malhotra, Chief Operating Officer, Viacom 18. Ladies and gentlemen, please applaud this panel. It's a very powerful panel. It takes a lot to get them on one stage. And Karan will be responsible in telling us, everybody present in the room, how to make a 1,000 crore blockbuster. Hopefully. Before that, the keynote from Mr. Greg Foster, before I make a mistake. Sir, please.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to thank the organizers of FICCI Frames for including us, and I'd like to also thank my fellow panelists for what I hope is a spirited conversation, and I've promised Karan that I'll be finished in 5 minutes, and he's watching. So I just want to give a brief overview of what IMAX is. I'm not sure all of you know. I hope very soon that all of you will. But we're a global company. We're in 53 countries. We have a little over 600 theaters. 4 years ago, we had 150 commercial theaters. Now, again, we have over 600. And the globalization of our business is responsible for that. We are an end-to-end solution that includes shooting with IMAX cameras, the projection technology, sound, aspect ratio and differentiation adjustment, and a variety of tools that make the process from the very conception of the design of a film to the very end and everything in between. Our theater growth, as I've noted, is quite exponential. We've gone from 150 odd theaters, as I mentioned, to over 600. We are all in on India. It's a market that has been a challenge to us, and we think we've finally been able to begin the process of figuring it out. And the primary reason for that is because of our commitment to Indian language films. To give a context of how our box office has changed in the last 12 to 18 months, in 2011, the overall box office globally internationally, so excluding the United States and Canada, went up 5% from 2011 to 2012. In IMAX, our box office internationally went up 54% in a 12-month year-to-date. The international growth is fueled by particularly strong growth in Russia, Japan, the UK, China, and now we are focused on India. The focus of the globalization of our content is again through local language films, which is the linchpin to further develop these important key territories. Doom 3 is the Indian film that we've announced that we're very excited to do. Again, content is the focal point of that, and I'm actually pleased today to announce that we'll be extending our arrangement with Yash Raj Films and are now doing Pani, which we're doing as well, and a third movie to be mutually agreed to. So it's important, however, that I let everyone know that while we so value our core relationship with YRF, just like in Hollywood, we work with Warner Brothers, we work with Paramount, we work with Disney, we work with Fox, we work with Lionsgate, we work with all of the studios, Sony. We also intend on working with all of the major filmmakers and studios in the Indian market, both in the north as well as in the south. And the key to our business has been filmmaker relationships. Filmmakers drive what we do. They understand the IMAX differentiation, they understand the quality of IMAX, and they want their movies to be seen with its best foot forward. And whether it's Steven Spielberg, Jim Cameron, J.J. Abrams, we focus on these relationships and provide the tools for them to make the movie the best way they can. And any way that we can contribute to that is fantastic. We will execute a very similar strategy in India, but we can't do it without the partnership of the studios and also of our exhibitor partners. We're very excited about our relationship with Ajay's company, PVR, who's been an amazing partner and helped break the logjam in this market. We also have a partnership with Kiran Reddy's company, and we will intend to expand our business in India. Right now, by the end of the year, we expect to have about 10 theaters open, but in the next 3 to 4 years, we hope that it can be a significant multiple of that. To give you a context, and then I'll finish my speech, within I think the 5 minutes. In China, in 2010, in January, we released Avatar, and it was released on 14 IMAX screens. Now we have 110 theaters in China that are open, and another 130 that have been contracted but have yet to open based on mall development times, et cetera. But they'll be open in the next 12 to 24 months. I'm not suggesting that India is going to be 250 theaters, but I do think 30, 40, touch wood, maybe 50 is doable in the next 2 to 3 years. And with that, I will sit down and enjoy the panel discussion. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you very much. All right. This has been pretty much thematically what we've been saying since we announced Vicky Frames 2013. The potential of achieving the 1,000 crore mark Initially, when we said this was our theme, engaging 1 billion consumers, and of course, proceeding to what we know as the 1,000 crore mark. Now, at this current state of affairs, the 1,000 crore mark is poetic and aspirational, but we believe, and we all believe, I'm sure, on this panel, that it's not very far removed from reality. I'm glad we have a very illustrious panel with us today to discuss the possibilities of achieving this mark and go beyond. We have with us Vikram Malhotra, Chief Operating Officer, Viacom 18 Motion Pictures. Siddharth Roy Kapoor, MD Studios, UTV Disney. We have Greg Foster, who already shared his thoughts with us from IMAX. Vijay Singh from Fox, as Fox Star Studios, India. And Ajay Bijli, the big head honcho of exhibition, PVR. Lots of us here are in the content providing business, and of course, we'll definitely discuss at length about how this topic is definitely a potential, and it's not just up in the air as terminology. Various reasons, I'm sure, will come up, various factors will come up. Is it exhibition expansion, exhibition intervention in a certain sense? Is it content, or is it just praying in a temple, mosque, or church that can make you achieve 1,000 crores? I'm sure all of that will be discussed today, and I'm really looking forward to it. So we're going to start with everyone's initial thoughts on the topic, and then, of course, go into a Q&A, and then open the questions to the house. Vikram, when you read this topic and when you heard the theme at FICCI, your initial thoughts?
We went from 25 to 50 crores to 100 crores. It took us a long time. The last 3 years, 100 crores has become the target to hit for every maker, every studio, every producer. When I first came across this subject, at the surface of it, it is aspirational. It is ambitious, where we are clocking in 100, 150 crores, depending on which way you look at these numbers, and to suddenly talk about doing a 10x on that. From my personal perspective, I'll put it in context using 2 planks. One, and I said this somewhere yesterday, if you look at the addressable population in this country, which is a target for taking to the movies, out of the total population of 120 crores, let's stick with a safe 30 crores. The biggest unique footfall for a film in this industry has not exceeded 4.5 crores. So when you suddenly context these numbers to their box office translation, because at the end of the day, 100 crores or 1,000 crores is a function of the number of people turning up at the movies, all you're really talking about is taking this number up to a very good 40 to 50% conversion from the addressable population. So while the number looks 10x to go from 100 to 1,000, and let's stick with that bar at the moment, what you're really saying is that the universe is still larger. So it's not as if it's a number which we'll have to convert every Indian to go to the movies, or we'll have to send every Indian twice to the theaters to hit that number. So one, going back to the context, it's an addressable target. It's a hittable target. It's a target which is hittable in a very near future. 2, I think like in any mature industry, for business to grow quantum, both sides, the upstream and the downstream side, need to flow together. Yes, the obvious answers are expansion of width of distribution, enhancing the experience, but as content creators, we also need to take the responsibility of pushing people, overcoming that inertia so that they come to theaters. We can't avoid consumption of our filmed content on smaller screens, across devices, on mobiles. And Greg's the right guy to talk about it going ahead, but look at the experience that the Western world is delivering. So to my mind, experience and driving footfalls at a very broad level is what one needs to nudge together.
So is UTV in agreement with Viacom on this?
Yes, I have to say that...
I'm going to cause some kind of studio war here, I think, today, which is purely my intention.
And that is so dharma, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, you know, I will say that yes, I am actually much in agreement with what Viacom says.
in this case. The way that I'd look at it is I'd look at content, then I'd look at the infrastructure, and I'd look at the regulation, and I'd look at these three aspects. One is, of course, that as Vikram just said, you've got an addressable audience of, say, 30 crore people. And I mean, the numbers are debatable, but some would say that there were 2.3 crore people who went to actually watch Three Idiots, and it was a number of admissions that was more because they went to watch it multiple times. But the fact remains that it was only that number of people. So one is, the content is really, when you're looking at a Hindi movie, you're talking to a Hindi-speaking audience only in this country. You're not able to translate that film, as most of Hollywood has managed to do, to large parts of the Indian population who don't really understand the sensibility of a Hindi film. So the whole of South India is actually excluded from what we're discussing. So content-wise,